Good morning, Team Radiant. I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to dive right in. Talk about a friend I've known, a situation that we kind of walk through, and maybe you'll see some hints in this with some people you know, or maybe you're walking through some of this as we start our new series. My friend Maya, though, from a very young age was looking for her Prince Charming. She dreamed about what her wedding would be one day, kind of had the house picked out in her mind and who the man was she would marry, even the kids. And if she was being honest, she may or may not have already picked out their names ahead of time too, but we're not saying. She was a smart, modern woman, just intelligent, driven. She wanted to be a speech pathologist, and she knew that someday she wanted to own her own office, maybe have her own place. She was driven by this. And so what Maya didn't realize is as she went into college, when she dated men, it wasn't always like her friends dated. In many ways, she was interviewing men. She was shopping for the right man, the right one to help her live out her dreams and experience what she wanted in her life, the picture she had created in her mind. And then one day she met Jaden. Jaden had dreams too. Jaden was good with money. He was good with finances and accounting. I wouldn't understand him at all. Yuck. He loved dealing with numbers. He was hoping someday to be a CPA, even had aspirations of moving on. He dreamed of being the chief financial officer for a Fortune 500 company or a vice president. He too was driven. He too had dreams and expectations in his life. And this is what kind of drew Maya to him. She liked his driven nature. She liked his seriousness. And more she got to know him. She liked him. And then she convinced herself even more and more so she was falling in love with Jaden. He seemed like the perfect guy. And Jaden loved that she laughed at his jokes and she didn't mind being around him. And so more and more he fell in love with her as well. And as their friends looked at him, they just kind of thought, this seems like the perfect couple. They just seemed like they were made for each other. And at this point, everything was going as planned. Right after college, they got married. It was that beautiful picture wedding that Maya had dreamed of. And again, everyone looked at them and said, what a beautiful couple. They seemed perfect for each other. Maya loved being around people. She was an extrovert. She just loved talking in groups of people. She kind of lived in the moment. Jaden, on the other hand, he wasn't so much a people person. He didn't like big crowds, but he was a planner. He was organized. Everything he did, he'd put a great deal of thought in. And in every way, the old maxim was true. Opposites do seem to attract, and they seemed like they were perfect for each other. They completed each other. At this point, again, everything was going as planned. Maya was headed off to go get her master's degree in speech pathology. Jaden was going to be getting his in accounting, working towards that CPA. Life was good. However, they didn't count on getting pregnant so quickly. And it happens. But they rolled with it, life has its curveballs, right? And wow, this is a kid. That was exciting too. Maybe it happened a little faster than they thought, but we're going to deal with this. And so Maya put school on hold at this time so that she could have the child and watch it and raise the kid. And as Jaden realized, well, I'm not going to be able to work part-time, so he had to go to work full-time at this point, and he decided to do school part-time. And they thought, this will work for a while, but don't we know, many of us who have gotten a little bit older and a little bit wiser, time goes quickly sometimes. Have you ever noticed that? They wake up 5 years later. She's got 2 kids. She's pregnant with the third. Maya loves her kids, adores them, doesn't regret it for a minute. But behind the scenes, down deep, she's still asking those questions. Are my dreams still there? Can I still accomplish what I thought I could accomplish? She still yearned for that, but she didn't tell Jaden really because she didn't want to bother with it. He was busy as well too. You see, Jaden's dream of having that job that we all dream of in college because, we're realistic in college. And, it's that perfect job where I only have to work about 28 hours a week, right? And I can come in anytime I feel like it, right? Right, you got that job, right? And you know what? And we've got that perfect boss. He's just my mentor. He's that father figure who's going to make me soar the heights of business. And we've got that perfect situation. But come to find out, Jaden's boss has a boss. And that boss expects results. And because that boss expects results, Jaden's boss expects results. And he expects him to work long hours. He expects him to work hard. And he expects him to get the job done. Why? Because if he can't, someone else will, right? And we learn, oh, that job that we thought we were going to have wasn't there. And so now he finds himself working really long hours, results driven, still trying to go to school, still trying to work it out, all while still trying to get towards that CPA test. See, that picture-perfect marriage that she dreamed of didn't include sleepless nights with a child, dirty diapers, housework, jobs, all the things that come with life. It didn't include a poorly paid entry-level job that many of us have to work first. It didn't include a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 700-square-foot home with barely any yard whatsoever. That just seemed cluttered. It seemed cramped. It's not what they dreamed of. And life seemed now to become a routine. You just kind of wake up, you work hard, you come home, you pass out, you wake up, you work hard. You know what I mean. We've all kind of been in that. You do it over and over again, and somewhere along the way, Maya started to get dissatisfied. This isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. This isn't the dream I had pictured in my mind. And she began to get angry at her husband. She began to direct that dissatisfaction to Jaden. She didn't understand why things weren't working out. And by the way, those little idiosyncrasies that were funny when we were dating, not so funny anymore. They're irritating me. Get your underwear off the floor, right? She's getting mad. And Jaden's struggling as well too. That tiny house that they live in always looks cluttered. It always looks disorganized. It seems like Maya spends more time on the phone than she spends with the kids, or cleaning, or getting dinner ready. And this just upsets him. And he thinks back to the time when they're dating. He's like, when we dated, she always just looked great. She wore these nice clothes, and she always did her makeup and looked done up. And he used to love that about her. But now it seems like her uniform is sweatsuits, and she looks like she just rolled out of bed. And he's wondering, what happened to that girl that I was dating? Quietly, he was getting angrier and angrier. But he wasn't the type of person to talk about it. He held things in. Someone like that, they don't talk about it. They hold it in. So he's just getting angrier. But you know what? From time to time, he sure wanted to help out. So he would give her helpful hints on how to be more efficient and more effective in the house, which works like magic. I mean, it's just awesome. Women love that, guys. As you can imagine, Maya just got angrier and angrier at this. This wasn't helping, and it seemed like her husband was a ticking time bomb. Everyone's kind of walking on glass around him because something was wrong. And she's wondering the same thing. Where's this man I fell in love with? Where's this man that used to just hold me in his arms, hug me, cuddle me, kiss me, tell me beautiful things, tell me he loved me? Where did that man go? That husband I used to love, he used to work out all the time with his friends. He loved sports. But now he's woken up and he's got to go to work full time. He's got to go to school full time. He's got to raise a family. No, he doesn't have time for the gym. He's put on a few pounds. She's wondering what happened to that man that I fell in love with. And as it got more frustrating and more frustrating, they both settled in on an idea, a dangerous idea. But it just happens in many marriages. They just sort of said, well, life is hard, and I guess it's going to stay that way for a long time. Life's hard. I guess it's just going to stay that way. And the reality was they were both unhappy. They had a lot to say, but it didn't seem like either party was listening. And the problems just kept building and building and building until one night, Maya said it. I'm unhappy. This isn't what I counted on. I want a divorce. Welcome to week 1 of our series. Hard way to start, isn't it? Tough way to dive into it. But I'm guessing you've heard this story before, or bits and pieces of it. I'm guessing maybe some of you are living this story at the moment. Sure, the circumstances and the names change a little bit, but the similarities are there. We all go into this thing with expectations. And there's one big truth today as we begin this 4-week conversation about marriage, one foundational idea that we have to keep in mind, and it's this idea. It's hard to fix something you don't understand, and it's even harder to fix something when you think the problem is the other person. So often, this is the starting point for many difficulties in a marriage. One of the things we have to wrestle through right from the very beginning. It's hard to fix something you don't understand, and even harder to fix something when you think the problem is the other person. What happens when the sweetness is gone from the marriage? When the friendship seems to be strained or seems to be wearing thin? What happens when the person you fell in love with or thought you fell in love with isn't the same person today? They've changed. What do we do then? Well, the first thing we have to do is ask an important question that you've probably already heard before. And this one's really going to weave its way throughout the entire series. But we have to ask this. And that question's simply this: what did you expect? Think about it. When you went into this thing called marriage, this relationship, what were your expectations? Because your expectations are driving your motivations. And I think a lot of people don't think about this. And it's not just a question for those of us out there who are married, no matter how long we've been married. This is a question for those who think I may get married someday. It would be good to stop ahead and say, what are my expectations as I go into this thing? Maybe you're engaged to be married. Maybe you're getting close to being married. Have you stopped to think, what are my expectations in this marriage? Because I'm convinced that many couples get married with unrealistic expectations from their spouse. And this can be a real problem when those expectations aren't met. Because eventually mismatched expectations run headfirst into each other. I liken it to the algebra equation I would get in middle school. And that equation would look something like this. The teacher would say, okay, this train leaves from station A going this speed headed towards station B. This train leaves from station B headed towards station A at this speed. At what point will they connect with each other? And my answer always was, beats me because I'm not good at math. But when they do, we're going to have a problem. When these two things hit each other, there's going to be a mess. There's going to be an explosion. There's going to be debris everywhere. And the problem is I think of a lot of marriages go in with mismatched expectations, and they're like that algebra problem. They're both, one's going this way, one's going this way. And I don't know where, I don't know when, not even sure how it's going to happen, but eventually they're going to go headfirst into each other. There's going to be an explosion, and we're all going to be left picking up the pieces. You know what I mean? When there's mismatched expectations, we have problems in the marriage. And so we have to realize this big thing too. It's hard for two people who are falling madly in love with each other to stop sometimes and ask the difficult questions before saying I do. It's hard when two people are in love, in that euphoria of the moment, sometimes to stop and say, what are some of those things we need to talk about before we say I do? What are my expectations in this? It's hard when you're wearing the love goggles to stop and put on the realistic goggles and say, what are the things we need to work through? What are some of those areas that are going to be problems later on? That's why we require at Radiant Church here all couples have to go through pre-marriage counseling before they get married, because we're going to look at some of those areas. We're going to try to find some of that stuff and get it out in the open from the start. Because if we're being realistic, for a lot of those people who remember that time when you were in love, when you were in that euphoric moment and you love the feeling of being in love, it's a great time. You don't really want to stop and ask the tough questions. Why? Because it scares you, if you're being honest. Because what if we do find something? What if we do uncover something difficult? What happens then? Are we going to lose this feeling? Are we going to break up? What happens then? And yet so many couples need to do this. And so in the coming weeks, we're going to dive more and more. What are some of these hot button issues? What are some of these areas that we need to work through, that we need to talk about, we need to be careful of out there? And here's my one big disclaimer, and I've learned this one the hard way. And I'm not being a pessimist when I say it. Trust me, I've got the scars to say this one. I can't fix your marriage. I just want to admit that to you right now. I can't. I don't have a magic wand. I can't fix your marriage. And the truth is I get entirely too many marriages when they do arrive at my doorstep that have gone on too long in not dealing with these issues, not handling what needed to be handled, and it's almost too late. We're in crisis mode at that point. And it's really hard, because they should have dealt with those issues long, long ago, but they were left undone. They were ignored along the way. They were swept under the rug. But how many of you have learned in life that even though you can sweep something under the rug, it's eventually going to rear its ugly head again? How many have learned that you can only ignore something so long before you really do actually have to deal with it? And that's what happens all too often in marriages. We just sweep things under the carpet. We say we'll deal with it later. And a later does eventually come. And so I can't fix anything. In truth, only God can fix your marriage. But it doesn't stop there either. You have to let Him. And I want to tell you, this is where the real problem starts. Are you willing to allow God to do what He needs to do to fix your marriage? Are you willing to surrender, to submit to God's leadership, to God's ways in your life? It's not going to be quick advice and 3 ways to spice up your marriage. It's not. It's going to be life change. And too many couples, really, when you ask what the problem is they're not willing really to let God deal with their marriage. They're too busy trying to fix it themselves. And that only works for so long, if it works at all. And so what I want to tell you is all I can do is facilitate a conversation. And my hope is in facilitating this conversation by pointing some things out. Maybe that helps you have a conversation with your spouse. Maybe that helps you go home and talk about it. Maybe you think about these things ahead of time before you get in a relationship, before you say, I do. In a marriage, my hope is just to create an environment that allows you to reflect on these things. That's my goal, to help fight these things before they become a problem, before 2 trains actually do collide into each other. That's all we're hoping to do here. And so as we dive in today in a 4-week conversation, so I want you to be here each and every week. We're going to build on it. I just want to put some basic principles in front of you that I think are important as we start this conversation and this series. These are fill-ins on the back of your worship guide if you want to use that to follow along and even reflect on those as you go into the week. And I think for some of these, they're going to seem a little bit like they're duh, but it's important that we talk about them and just set this as a foundation in our conversation. So what are some of those key ideas we need to put forward as we have this conversation? The first one is this: this world is broken. And that's right away when you might say, well, duh. Of course, we knew that already, Jason. But the reality is this: because this world isn't operating as God intended it to, because it is broken, this brokenness is going to find its way into your marriage. It's going to find its way into your house. You can't avoid it. We live in a broken world with broken people. That brokenness is going to find its way in your home. And things will not always be perfect. Things aren't always going to go as planned in our lives. And oftentimes we have to be okay living in the circumstances that God places us in. And be content with that and be at peace with that. Realizing we live in a broken world. Which gets us then to our next point. Every marriage will face the unexpected. Every single one. No matter how well you prepare, no matter how well you plan. And this can be a struggle if you're one of those folks that likes to prepare and plan and be organized and everything has to be just so right in life and everything has to line out a certain way. This one point can really be a struggle. Because life does have the unexpected. It does throw curveballs at us. Somebody will get sick. Sometimes people die. Sometimes we lose jobs. Sometimes we have to move. There's all sorts of things in life that will cause us to have to take a step back and say, hey, what just happened here? And these things are out of our control sometimes. And you just got to be aware that while you may be a planner and while you like to be thinking about things and moving the pieces along, there will be some pieces that move and you didn't count on it, didn't plan on it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes life just happens. We have to be okay with that. The third point is key to today's conversation, and one of the hardest ones actually when talking with people about marriages. And that's this. You are a sinner. Some of you are going, no, I'm not. Well, you are. Yes, you are. You're a sinner. What's the Bible tell us in Romans 3:23? For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All means all. And this is hard in a marriage. Why do I bring that up? Well, it's because everybody has a sin problem. And so since we live in a broken world and unexpected things happen, and because we're all sinners, all of this brokenness, all of this sin, every piece of it makes its way into our marriage. There's no way to avoid it. It's just going to be there. But this is particularly hard. Hear me on this. It's particularly hard to understand you're a sinner if you're so busy blaming your spouse for everything that's going on rather than taking a deep, hard look inside. Ouch, right, Jason? Ouch. But it's true. I don't know how many times I've seen a couple come in, talk my life, and spend the next 20 minutes telling me how crappy their spouse is while they're sitting there. And you're thinking, well, what about you? And they're like, I don't have a problem. Will you just fix my spouse? You already know the answer to that. There's still sin inside you. All of you. We all struggle and wrestle with things. God's not done with us yet. There's still unfinished business in our lives. And this sin disease mars our image, the image that is supposed to be God. And it keeps us from being the person He created us from being and doing what He created us to do. We all have a sin disease that needs to be dealt with. And oftentimes in a marriage, I get it. I've not been in that marriage where it's completely one person's fault. In every single situation I've dealt with marriages, both in the couple had something they needed to work on. Both needed to look within. Now, is it a little 60-40 sometimes? Can be. But I haven't come across a situation that was completely lopsided on one person. All of us have junk that needs to be worked on. And that's so important. When you sit and think through your expectations and you sit and think through things didn't quite go as planned. But that gets to the next point too. You are a sinner married to a sinner. The person you married is a sinner. At some point in the relationship, somebody's going to say something unkind. Somebody's going to do something rude. There will be jealousy. There will be rage. There will be anger. Why? Because of everything we've talked about so far, we are all sinners. And that sin makes its way into our relationships, which is why we get to the most important point of them all. Your marriage will need grace. Lots of it. Your marriage is going to need grace. It's going to need you to show grace. You've got to remember God loves your spouse and is hard at work conforming your spouse into His image and making him more and more like His Son. But here's an important thing maybe you've never thought about or reflected on, and this is so important. He often will use you as an agent for their rescue because the two become one. And while we often criticize or try to find the little faults and the problems where the two become one in that relationship, God will often use the spouse to be an agent for change, to challenge, to help grow. You are part of the process of helping your spouse become more and more like Jesus Christ. And that's a huge, important thing to keep in mind. Because when you see their weaknesses and you see their failures, it's a moment to show grace and love, not condemnation and anger. The same grace and love, by the way, Jesus Christ showed you on a cross when He loved you unconditionally, regardless of what you've done, where you've been, who you've hurt. Jesus said, I love you so much, I died on a cross for you. I surrendered my life for you. And that same love, that same grace, that same mercy that Jesus showed us, we are expected to show our spouse. Our marriages need grace. God put you with this person to help mold them more and more to the image of His Son. Which gets us to our so what moment as we try to land the plane, and hopefully maybe I've whet your appetite. There's going to be some great weeks ahead as we dive further and further into some of these topics. This idea of grace and brokenness and sin. As we start this journey as looking at our marriages and motivations, we have to remember it starts with you. Be careful about blaming your spouse. Be careful about trying to deflect or hide. This conversation starts with you. Maybe in your marriage you have to ask that question, can I and will I show grace? Will I show them the grace of a Savior? But to show grace, here's what I'm convinced of. You have to have experienced grace. Because the people who are best at showing grace are the ones who have experienced that supernatural grace and love that only comes from God. Whenever we see grace, we realize that we have to worship the giver of that grace. And that's where we land on perhaps an even bigger perspective today. You see, a loving marriage isn't founded on romance. It is rooted in worship. Did you see that? You see, the honeymoon period will be over at some point. And you know what? The romance isn't always there. It's got its ups and downs sometimes. But our marriages are to be rooted in worship, which means God and Jesus is at the center of our marriage. Everything I told you today are biblical principles, but this, my dear friends, is where the rub is. All too often, I'll have marriages come and say, it's exploding, things are going wrong, it's not going well. And I'll ask the questions, well, how are you doing with Jesus? Tell me a little bit about your spiritual journey. Are you reading Scripture? Are you praying? And by their blank faces, I can only really think of two things. Either A, they have no clue what I'm talking about, or B, I just kicked their dog and they don't understand why. They literally look at you like, what are you talking about? And how dare you ask that question? But then I always kind of look, I'm like, I'm a pastor. What do you think I'm going to ask? It shocks me how few marriages get to me that look at me and say, we've not had Jesus anywhere in our marriage. And I tell you that a strong marriage is rooted in the worship of Jesus Christ. He is at the center. When you ask me and Christy, how have we made it for 24 years? I will tell you, only by the grace of Jesus, because he was at the center of everything we do. And I bet there's several other marriages out there that would say the same thing. You've got to have Jesus at the center of your marriage. Problem is when we rely on expectations rather than putting Jesus at the center of our marriage, our expectations eventually betray us. Because life is hard, change happens, things don't go as planned, and eventually the honeymoon is over. Your expectations aren't going to be enough to sustain you in the long haul. You got to take a hard look at them. Realize that change in the marriage often starts with you. You have to look inside and ask, what are those areas I need to work on? Quit trying to fix your spouse for the moment and look inside and ask, what are those things that I need to take a close look at? What is it God needs to reveal to me? Those hidden things in my heart. And realize you have to ask this question. Is Jesus at the center of our marriage? Is he at the center of my life? Or are we just trying to do it our way? Is our marriage rooted in worship? Everything about a godly conversation on what the Bible has to say about marriage and what God would have to say about marriage starts there. Is Jesus at the center of your marriage? I need you to wrestle with that. Talk about that as a couple this week. And then let's continue that conversation next week. Let's pray.